Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here today with a really strong panel. As we were preparing for this session, we talked at length as a group around, how you're all equipping your leaders to be future ready. And the concept of manager as a connector was one of the themes that we talked about. And so for all of you in the audience who may not be as familiar with this idea of manager as a connector, according to Gartner's recent research, 5,000 plus global managers, they found that the most valuable skill is the ability to be a connector, particularly in today's world. And they did this study in the last couple of years amidst a lot of the dynamic challenges that we've been facing, and many of you have been navigating in your organizations, and as well as your lives at large. What being a manager as a connector, that idea of connecting really means, is about connecting employees to a broader network of influencers, encouraging them to meet their developmental potential, which really can accelerate innovation within your organizations, because it's accelerating the transformation within themselves, one individual at a time. So with that context, I want us to dive right in, and I'd like to pose this first question to Takmin and Elena. In your businesses, what are the 1 to 2 top shifts that are driving the need for your next generation of management and leadership?
Elena, would you like to have the privilege first?
Thank you very much. I think, first of all, a big thank you for having me here, and it's indeed a privilege to be part of this distinguished panel. So thank you, Dr. Liz. I think if we really look at what's happening post-pandemic as we're going back, there is an absolute need for the new type of leaders. Now, being a good leader, whether it's before pandemic or after pandemic, it did not change. Fundamentally, how you engage people did not change. Strong connections with one works, with colleagues, letting people feel like a real contributor, enjoying little chances to learn and big chances to learn. Again, this stays the same. However, pandemic elevated and probably put under a spotlight the absolute need to have leaders as connectors. Not only people are talking about when, where, and how they work, but also why they work. They really want to recontract, make emotional contract, and in some sense connect to the real meaning of work, of what they do, how that benefits the bigger picture. So I guess to your question is pandemic, what we're seeing happening is absolutely accelerated the need for such type of leaders.
Absolutely.
Well, I think from my perspective, perhaps some of the major shifts that I've noted in the last 2 years or so would be the first and foremost, the shift towards becoming more responsive, more agile, more nimble. In the last 2 years, when we have to, effectively we were forced to make changes, right? Not that I suppose there's this joke that's going around at one point. The best CTO in town is not my CTO, not your CTO, but the pandemic, and the pandemic forced us to develop new ways of working from home, working remotely, and so on and so forth. But with that, we have to learn a whole new set of skills. For example, now, the fact that we are here in this conference, but talking to each other virtually, that's a whole new set of skills too. Learning to navigate, trying to switch on your mic, switch off your mic, and putting on your video and off your video, and so on and so forth. So I think the becoming agile is one of the big shifts I've seen among our employees. In the banking world, that is not something easy. It's always fraught with challenges, simply because in the banking world, a lot of work is done face-to-face, especially at the branches and so on. And suddenly we are now told to find ways to reach out to our customer, find ways to continue to do your selling, but without the physical contact. And suddenly you have to go into all these virtual platforms and have to communicate with your clients virtually and things like that. And surprisingly, we did well. We survived. Not only did we survive, we thrived. And that, to me, is agility. And in fact, UOB has actually done quite well despite the challenges that we went through. I suppose the other shift that I noted would be that quite certainly there was a major shift from this tendency to have a fixed mindset. You think that everything I need to learn is already available and I've done it and I know it all, and I've eaten more salt than you have eaten rice or whatever. And we take it as if we have reached a plateau in our life. But the fact of the matter is that that's not the case. And so many of us now realize there's so many more things to learn. And that's just shift from a fixed mindset to what I would call a growth mindset. And increasingly, employees are also beginning to realize that you cannot stop learning. You have to keep growing, keep learning, right? For example, by 2028, most high-value work will be cognitive in nature. And employees will have to apply creativity, critical thinking, constant digital upskilling to not only solve problems, but to in fact be able to make use of data to tell stories, to provide insight, and to help make life better for people. So this data storytelling becomes a very powerful skill that you need to have. And we can only expect that this will get more and more challenging. And employees must constantly refresh their digital dexterity to meet the needs ahead. And I think this growth mindset will mean that we will all want to continue to see how we can become better and learn to maneuver around new skills. And I think that is something that is good for us, that we don't become complacent or become used to our current set of skills and stop there.
I'm glad you brought that up. I remember when we were chatting a couple of weeks ago, we talked in many different examples that you all were providing around rethinking talent development based on this ever-growing need for more nimbleness, more agility. But also, I think one of the things that you mentioned, Elena, was really coming back to some of the fundamentals and tapping into those areas of what really makes people thrive, which has not changed, right? Having some purpose, mastery, which is that growth, that continuous need to learn and want to grow. Having some purpose and meaningfulness, those are fundamental needs that we have as human beings. So it's this interesting combination of how do we come back to those fundamentals, but start to really kind of bolster them even by being more, holding on to those in those times of change and while being nimble at the same time. And I remember, Aditi, you had mentioned some very interesting things when we were chatting. And I'd love to hear very specifically, what are some of the skills and mindsets that, you know, at Citi, you're all focused on that really is kind of at the crux of some of the next generation management. And then I'd love to hear also from Meyav around what's going on over at Zendesk as well.
Thanks, Liz, and thanks, Tak Ming and Elena. You know, just sort of paraphrasing a little bit around, you know, what's making that shift. I think there are two fundamental things. So one is a world that is a lot more connected and digital today. I think this journey obviously started a few years back, but just got us much more closer in the last about 2 years or so. So I think that has made a lot of our, you know, collaboration and, you know, relationships and interactions in a very, very different form today. And the other piece of, you know, change that has obviously happened is that, you know, everybody around us has become a lot more empathetic and resilient. So that that need that was sort of driven by pandemic has almost become a perpetual need. So these are, you know, expectations from the next gen leaders that are not sort of going to go away. So keeping these two sort of things in mind, I think, you know, the expectations from leaders today are, or even, you know, anybody who's you know, in organizations, are manifold, right? I mean, they are expected to be, you know, great at delivering results. At the same time, they're expected to be, you know, great at all the fundamentals of management. And so, you know, how do we really equip those managers to do everything at the same time and be their best at all points of time, and not sort of, you know, let themselves down is a big challenge. You know, we are expecting them to not just be great at, business results, but demonstrate a number of these future-looking skills, which are around collaboration, resilience, empathy, things that they may not have focused on, mental well-being, for themselves and their teams. So there is a lot of expectation from managers at large, and I think as organizations, we need to create that infrastructure and environment where we can really support them, through this journey, because this is here to stay. This is not something which is transient and will sort of go away post-COVID.
Absolutely. One of the things that stuck with me when we were chatting, Aditi, was you used the phrase, while our managers are wearing many hats, as they always do, and it seems that that plate is ever growing, we have a responsibility to recognize their humanity, right? And to support them so they really can bring their more authentic self. And I hear that in a lot of the different things that you are all talking about. Neha, I'd love to hear, a little bit from you around those kind of what you're tackling at Zendesk and those specific skills and capabilities that may be the same and may be different from what we've heard so far.
Yeah, thank you. I think, again, listening to all the stories and perspectives from the panelists, I don't think we are any different with, the many represented around the room today. As an organization for Zendesk, we want to strive towards becoming a champion of customer service, as you can see from my Zoom backdrop. And you kind of translate that internally. And the expectation of the next generation managers is that if you're leading a team, you must be a champion of the employee experience and what that means at Zendesk. We talk about digitalization. We want to embrace that as the way forward, not only as a means to achieve business results, but also ensuring that the employees are supported and seen along the way as they deliver their best work. We at Zendesk, I think, we kind of experimented with that a little bit more by sharing about our principles, and that kind of put the stick in the ground around what we believe to be important as we embrace collaboration, partnership. And one of the principles that is well defined for us as an organization is the fundamental belief that great works happens anywhere. And with that, I think it also then gives managers the perspective that, hey, how do I facilitate this great work from happening? I'm not going to be concerned about who comes into the office, who's not in the office. I'm not concerned about the working hours. I want to be able to create that conducive environment. And the leadership kind of framework that we used here is around leading yourself. How do leaders role model? How do you communicate with purpose, clarity? How do you lead your team? Drive connections, collaboration, and how do you lead the business? So all of these ingredients, and then you kind of layer in the whole environment to allow people to respect, nurture differences. I think that's another fundamental building block that we're shifting to do more in because we want employees, we want the managers to inculcate that everyone can bring their whole self to work and participate in this journey together.
I'd love to hear, if you could continue on that, Mayat, I'd love to hear a little bit around, given this focus, this real shift in what you're trying to inculcate in your managers and helping them create new mindsets, what's one thing that you're doing differently in your leadership development programs or strategies that is really helping to develop this new way for them?
I think there are two different ways that I think we are, kind of doubling down our efforts in creating dialogues. And firstly, embracing flexibility. We talk about how we work, and we ran many sessions across the world with people managers to talk about how have your practices shifted in the way you're leading the team, in the way that you're doing one-on-ones, in the way that you're opening up some of these meetings, just so that we challenge ourselves a little bit further in making sure we're intentional, that when we meet is for a purpose. When we have a Zoom meeting, that everyone brings something into the room. It isn't just a listen in, because we are all so worn out and tired by so many Zoom meetings. So that's on the how we work part in terms of really driving some of those conversations down to the people managers, so that we have a chance to really reflect first. the pandemic forces us to adapt virtually and you know, all the tools that comes with it. But when we go back into the office, the real test will come. How will we keep some of these digital first practices alive? Do we just all go back into the office? I don't think that will be the reality. We're going to accommodate more flexibility. We're going to accommodate more differences and needs of employees, and our managers rather, need to start to shift towards that. The second example I will give is really this, you know, what I talked about in respecting, nurturing differences, and the work around psychological safety. I think that's, again, a dialogue, a journey that we've started, that we need people to understand. What does it mean to allow, you know, each of us to be authentic, but also respectful? And as we grow and as we innovate, that's the kind of conversations we want to trigger. In a region like APAC, this is extremely challenging, right? Differences in culture is inbuilt as part of our dynamics and diversity of what this region represents. And I think, you know, like I said, this is just a journey that we're starting on. We're going to wait and see how this evolves and becomes an impactful way to change and transform our employee experience.
I think that word that you use, journey, right? Sometimes we think of mindset shifts and behavior change as a destination and the check the box, but it's not. It's an ongoing journey that's constantly evolving. And you mentioned peer learning, and creating dialogue between leaders is a really powerful lever that you are doing as a part of your strategies at Zendesk. And I know that that's a part of some of the other panelists' strategies as well. Elena, I'd love to hear a little bit about some of the things that you're doing. What's one example you can give us around what's new and different around how you're approaching leadership development?
Absolutely. I think great sharings here. I'm hearing, you know, if you think about what happened over the last 2 years, you know, we're entering personal spaces. We're entering people's bedrooms, kitchens. We are getting introduced to their pets, their kids. Like, you know, that what Maya said is, you know, how do we create that psychological safety so that our people can actually be very happy to share, you know, all their household and everything. So we, so again, that completely transforms connecting. If the amount of new words that I've been hearing over the last, you know, 2 years is amazing. Bubble travel, travel bubble, social distancing, connecting at emotional level while being socially distant. You're on mute, well, at least I hear it every time. So, you know, all those things, new vocabulary. So definitely we see kind of on the background of that, how we actually strive. So how do we move from being change ready into change agile? So I guess specifically kind of what exactly that means. So we continue on what Maya said. We are having in-depth discussions with our line managers. We created few toolkits that, you know, sometimes you just need to specifically call out everyday behaviors of line that is expected of line managers in the new norm. But what we did, we made sure that each of them contributed how they saw what worked for them, what they think they would like to do more. One thing which was received with lots of energy is, are you following your direct reports on social media? Is it difficult? Does it cost anything? But imagine about engagement when you just give like. We talk about diverse employees. Give your diverse employees, you know, a thumb up. Comment saying fantastic work. Do you know what? That again, that costs nothing, goes a long way. So if you think fundamentally, and I keep thinking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you know, before pandemic, probably even earlier, just kind of making sure that the bottom tiers were provided to employees. That's, you know, your salary, your bonus, you know, maybe your whatever other benefits. That was enough. But as we're going further up, you know, kind of connecting with that purpose, having those discussions with your teams is absolutely vital. So again, a very specific example is equipping our managers with very specific skills, you know, and having that, enabling that peer dialogue of what they do that seems to be working.
Absolutely. I love like all of these different examples of the peer learning, and also again, that kind of calling back to fundamentals and so many of the things that we can do that make an impact don't cost us much at all or anything at all, right? Takmin, you had talked about a couple of different things that you're doing over at UOB, and I'd love to hear a little bit about, what's one, approach that you're seeing taking roots, to really help with some of that agile thinking, growth mindset that you were talking about before.
Maybe I should start off by connecting back to what Eleanor said just now, and also what Mei,
Yeah.
right? One of the things that I noticed as a result of this period where we have to go through the pandemic is that this whole area of compassion. I think managers increasingly, I think managers need to demonstrate that you're there for your colleagues, that you care about your colleagues, and all the more when you are working remotely. And that is a skill that I think on the one hand is a value, you can say it's part of your value system, part of the way you live your life. But it's also a skill set in the sense that developing the ability to have empathetic communication is not necessarily something that everyone does well. And that's one of the things that we have actually embarked on in UOB. We want to try to see how we can get our team leaders, our first line managers, especially because they are the ones who, at the end of the day, have the day-to-day contact with the employees. We want to see how we can help them to develop that area, their EQ, and to have that empathetic communication with the employees, to know how to listen and to listen for nuances, especially when the employees are struggling, and to know how to then support them in positive language. And also to be there to observe and to be mindful of potential areas of mental stresses and things like that. So that's one big area that we have actually worked on, especially in the last 6 months or so. And the other things that we want to focus on as we move forward together is that mentoring skills are going to be a big thing going forward. And I think increasingly and more so when you have people working remotely, and in UOB, we are definitely doing it that way. In fact, I think it just came out today in the Age. There's an article about us going hybrid as part of our long-term strategy. And so we will, once this, when we move back to a near normal situation, this is what we will be doing. We will be enabling our colleagues to work up to 2 days a week at home or remotely for that matter. And but at the same time, we will still want them to come back to office, right? So that there will still be that camaraderie, that working together, that bonding, and the collaboration and all those things. That very importantly, build the culture and so on. But the fact is that they are going to be working remotely on a long-term basis now, and so it's critical that we teach our leaders the skills of mentoring, because you're not going to be seeing them all the time in the office. You're not going to be working with them all the time, day to day, face to face, but you will be spending more and more time with colleagues who potentially may not always be in the office. How do you mentor them so that they will be able to grow, and how do you nurture them so that they will have they will see that they are given the opportunity to take on new work and things like that. So I think increasingly the ability to provide good mentoring, to do talent nurturing, will become part of that development as well. And if that works out well, then I think you will help us to continue to engage our colleagues so that our employees will always stay engaged and stay motivated.
Absolutely, really great examples, and lots of similarities and certainly some differences across. I want to turn to a few questions that we're getting from our audience, and I'm wondering if Aditi, but please anybody else jump in, but maybe you can start us off with this next one around that shift in mindset. So we've been talking about that this whole time during the panel discussion, but the question is, how do we really put an intervention or that strategy together that really helps to take that old school thinking, that management, I'll call it the management 101, old school thinking, really into a new sort of position? You know, how are you really navigating that at Citi?
Okay, again, I was on mute, so unmuting myself. So I think one of the things that has really helped us is the fact that we realize that managers love to be heard. So, you know, they have a lot of experiences to share. And one of the important things that we did as part of our sort of learning journey or leadership development was democratize learning. And what I mean by that is that we gave the choice to the managers to identify some of the needs that they have and pick and choose the content that would be most appropriate for them, depending upon the kind of situation that they are in. And then, you know, to your point, Liz, around peer learning became extremely powerful here because people in that kind of a scenario weren't looking so much for content, but what they were looking for is experiences that everybody is going through similar things and everybody's learning together. So, you know, to the point around sort of mindset shift, I think it was really important to make everybody feel that we're all in the same boat together and we're looking for solutions, you know, together in this. The other key thing to sort of mindset shift is, you know, really providing some very clear upskilling and reskilling opportunities for people. Because we've been talking a lot about, you know, future of work and future of, you know, future skills that will take us, you know, to the next level. But often we don't even know what those future skills might look like because the world around us is evolving so quickly that it's really difficult to sort of keep pace with everything. So just providing a huge wide platform to employees and just building that sort of learning agility in them, saying that constantly keep learning. You know, there is never dearth of obviously resources available, but it's for you to sort of pick those up and constantly keep making sure that, you know, you are in that journey of seeking, sensing, is something that really, really helped us. And I think the last thing I would say is just around that agility point that I think most of the panelists made. How do you constantly keep what's available agile so that the, you know, the audience does feel that, you know, it's absolutely tailor-made for them. So, you know, that fine balance between having content which is modularized, but at the same time has that flexibility to, you know, cater to the needs of the audience at that point of time was really important. And it is difficult. I think that mindset shift, we all acknowledge, may not happen in a few weeks or a few months. So we've always looked at it as a journey and, you know, celebrating success at different milestones and, you know, applauding people who've actually demonstrated some of those behaviors that the organization is driving is another way where we've seen a lot of appreciation coming in.
Absolutely. It's very similar to what Elena was talking about before as well. Thank you for that. I want to go to another question, specifically around, you know, the idea of sort of values that we have as human beings, values that we have as employees, and all the research that I have read, you know, around values and values maybe across just generations is that there are no major differences in work values across generations. They just pop in and out and matter at different points in time. I would be very curious to hear, are any of you seeing major shifts in your companies around what employees are valuing? If so, what is your response to that? If not, I'd love to hear, you know, kind of how that comes into play into any of the strategies or approaches that you're taking. Elena, maybe you want to kick us off on that one.
Sure. I just would maybe add to the previous question, because I think whoever asked this question would definitely benefit by reading what Adam Grant wrote earlier this year in Harvard Business Review. The article is called Persuading the Unpersuadable. And I personally benefited a lot from, which very much kind of echoes what Aditi was saying, don't recognize what's wrong with the person, recognize what's strong with the person, and use that to bring the person along. But to your further question on I guess generational differences, I will not take a credit. I once attended a fantastic event on generations, which was completely eye-opener for me. So the person who was facilitating pointed to two people in the audience who looked as representatives of completely different generations. Someone who was a baby boomer, he asked, "What do you value in your work?" And the gentleman answered, good, respect, good pay, good boss, opportunity to learn. I still want to learn. Then he pointed to someone who looked absolutely young and said, "And what would you value?" And he said, "Oh, definitely opportunity to learn, good boss, good pay." And at that point in time, as they were, as the young gentleman was going, it just struck me. They value the same things. It may be that the newer generation is more vocal about what they want, right? It may be generation of boomers. They are taught culturally, societally to keep their needs and wants, put company first, as opposite to youngsters coming with a talent first approach. So how do we as an organization then tackle it? We started talking a while ago about this whole talent first approach that needs to be reflected, starting from the way our letters, the way our contracts, the way our policies are written. Let's go back and relook at what we have, whether it is the company that we all want to work or it is something that is legacy. Honestly, that was a very good beginning. It's a tough journey. There is no such thing as we have arrived, so we definitely continue doing it. But I would definitely say fundamentally we need to see, are our processes and policies putting talent first lenses, or we are really kind of taking old-fashioned way of personnel kind of approaches.
Absolutely. Really great example. And I love your call out to what Adam Grant had mentioned in that article, and really great book, The Think Again, which is where a lot of that is coming from. So really fantastic for anybody who's interested in reading that. We have several more minutes, and what I'd love to do is kind of want to go around, and I'll kind of let each of you speak to some maybe final pieces of advice or key learning, that you can share with the audience, given the journeys that you've been on, the amazing work that you're doing, the challenges that you're facing, and also the opportunities that you're conquering and grabbing hold of. What key learning would you share to the audience who's navigating similar opportunities? Can we start with you, Tak-Ming?
Well, okay. I think very importantly, and especially so in organizations that are a little bit more structured, like us in the banking industry, it's the tone from the top. If the tone from the top is there and is very strong, then it would certainly help to push forward the whole agenda for the change. So, for example, in where we are in UOB, we are actually moving to a new building next year, in July next year. We have this spanking new building that we have built in KL, and it's going to be high performance workplace, agile working, wonderful, etc. And the one thing that we are very concerned about is you can have a high performance workplace, but you can have a very for one of use of a Malay word, a kolot mindset. Yeah, that means a mindset that is conservative, old-fashioned, old school, top-down, do your own, don't disrupt me, silo mentality, and so on. And then all these high-performance workplace will be useless. What you need is a high-performance workforce, and that's where this tone from the top becomes very important. My CEO himself and the rest of us, and of course driven by us in HR, we started on the journey since early this year to start to educate and encourage all our senior management to set the same tone that we need to be agile. We need to have that same mindset to align ourselves to this agile culture and agile mindset, and to have agile values and principles to move forward together. And we hold ourselves accountable that we will demonstrate it, we will role model it, we will adapt to the new way of doing things, and we will make commitment to our employees, our team members, what we intend to do to become more agile.
Absolutely.
And that has become part of the process, you know, and I think that has worked tremendously well. And that has resulted to some extent, a lot more confidence today that, hey, this is, the bank is serious, you know, the management is serious. They're not joking about it. We're not just putting up posters on the wall. You know?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And so I think that the role modeling is very, very important, and it has to come from the top. And then we see that happening across now. You know.
That's for sure. And we talked about that, I know, in our prep sessions too. And many of you have talked about, you know, that leadership championship, which is important with any change.
Yeah.
In our last 3 minutes, I'll hit Maya. What's one learning that you would love to share with the audience? And then we'll go to Aditi and we'll round it out with Elena.
My perspective is really keeping the mindset to keep experimenting. Gone are those days where you have one big program and you give it a big bang. I think we're going to have to look for those opportunities to land, you know, pilots, land version 1, version 2, version 3, so that you can keep adapting to the needs.
Truly modeling the agility. Aditi, what's one learning you'd like to share?
I think one learning I'd love to share, which has also personally worked for me, and I encourage everybody, you know, within our organization to look at, is constant learning agility. I think we need to be lifelong learners and constantly keep looking at newer skills that we can build, you know, upskill the skills that we currently have, so that we are always future ready. Because, you know, if we reach the future and then say that, you know, now I'm here and I realize these are skills around me and I need to build, it might be a little too late. So to be ahead of the game, I think it's really important that we're constantly thinking ahead, you know, sort of trying to read the future and preparing ourselves for it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Elena, take us home.
Sure. Well, again, so many great advices, and you guys took all the words out of my mouth. So what I would add is in CARIER, we have a value called Dare to Disrupt. And that's my favorite value. It's honestly, everything that you do, ask, is it the right way? Is it still valid way? What got you here will not get you there. Will get you there. So is there an opportunity to improve? Don't just blindly follow the process. Question, challenge. You know, definitely you will be noticed. Bring efficiency. Use every opportunity to review and rethink, to re-engage. So definitely Dare to Disrupt is it's not a new norm, but it's an expectation of everyone, I guess.
And ever more important.
That's right.
I want to thank all of you so much. There was such rich discussion here, lots of similarities, lots of unique things, and I'm super grateful for the time that we've been able to spend preparing for this session, being here today. And with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Priya and just on behalf of Coach Hub and my fellow panelists, just thank you so much for having us. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of the conference.
Thanks, Liz.